Welcome everyone and thanks for joining our first EMBED Talks podcast. My name's Sarah Simcoe, I'm the creator and founder of EMBED, and in our first EMBED Talks we are going to be talking about social media and heritage and how to get started. And joining me today, I'm delighted to say, is Becky Morris from DCN. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you doing?
Really well, thanks. Yeah, busy, really good. Nice and busy.
Busy's good right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, busy's good right now. We've been working quite a lot together, so I know how much you've got on right now.
Yeah, I think this is such an important opportunity for so many sectors right now to re-engage and reflect during the lockdown period on what it can really do in terms of services and the workforce in developing inclusive practice, because the wider reach you have, it really supports you in everything that you do. So at DCN, I've been particularly busy in regards to that and what we can do, because we're working together, aren't we?
Oh,
It's so exciting.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
I've known you for a few years now, and
Yeah.
Where we are right now, so EMBED is obviously right across the diversity and inclusion agenda, right across protected characteristics and across all those sectors. So the place we find ourselves in now as EMBED, as that consortium, is partnering with more sector-specific experts like yourself, with DCN around specific topics and taking that into great sectors like heritage and creative industry, and really helping to bridge the conversation, whether that's one around intersectionality or whether that's one around collaboration and learning lessons. So it's really exciting. I know we've already gone to press with our exciting new partnership for heritage.
This is it.
Which is
great. I think actually we may be unique as well, because I don't think I've worked in the sector for 23 years now, and I've never known this before, of an actual collaborative cross-sector partnership. So the opportunities are incredible, and I'm just really excited by all of this.
So for those who may not be so familiar with DCN, tell us about DCN and then tell everyone a little bit more about this unique offering that we're going to take to heritage.
Well, DCN started off first and foremost as a website of resources back in 2015. And we always said that one of the difficulties was finding specific information that could actually reach out to audiences who may have differing needs. But then that website launched and we had time to reflect and realize that museums talk a lot to other museums, and whether or not that guidance was actually the most appropriate. So what we did was we reached out to other sectors to find out what they were doing. And that's when we saw some very significant gaps. And we have got contacts across the country and internationally, which is great. And those contacts in turn have been giving us opportunities to actually reflect about what our priorities should be in a representative workforce, as inclusive service provision and also inclusive practice in regards to our workforce and our way we do things, because everybody's needs change throughout their entire lives, but this is where the toolkits and the other elements of museum work don't quite fit. So what we do, we're about, hence the name, embedding inclusive practice right across the organisation and actually align the heritage sector to current best practice in regards to equality, diversity and inclusion. And that's why we're partnering with EMBED.
It's such fantastic news. And when I created EMBED, there were three core drivers, and essentially when for some of you may be familiar with me from my days at Fujitsu. I was at Fujitsu for nearly 20 years. I was 10 when I started, for almost 20 years. Brilliant company to work for. Learned a great deal around diversity and inclusion and responsible business. And when I went self-employed a couple of years ago, what I noticed was the ability to access services that we would deliver as EMBED, so equality, diversity, inclusion services in whatever form they take, was not necessarily that accessible for certain sectors or certain organisations for various reasons, whether it was resources, cash, understanding and awareness, various reasons. So when I created EMBED, there was 3 core reasons for doing so. One was, I'm a huge believer in collaboration. I think collaboration breeds innovation.
Yeah.
And bringing together cross-sector expertise in the consortium allows us all across sectors to learn the lessons from each other and leverage what good can really look like. The second piece was around offering a way for those organisations, and typically sectors like heritage and smaller to medium organisations, can access our support that is much more hands-on. So we're not going to turn up and tell you what to do and then leave, head off into the sunset. We're actually going to help you bring about that change. And then the third one was making sure at the heart of everything we talk about is people. Our greatest asset in any organisation is the people, whether that's the people within the business or whether that's the people that we serve. So being able to partner with yourself around DCN and focusing the attention and the effort into heritage, I think essentially ensures we can marry those 2 things up that you spoke about, the practice and the provision.
I think this is it, because for me it starts, we're going to be talking about social media today, but for me it starts right off from the public messaging right up to what objects you accept in respect to personal narratives. And museums have got such a powerful tool in that we are seen as an authority within our communities, and we can change minds about other people. And right now we are seeing such a radical and complete swift change in everything that we do as a society, that often you need those stakes in the ground to enable people to really feel, oh right, the museum's doing that, oh that's okay then. But for me it's always about, what about the people that don't see the museum as a place of community, primarily because it's exclusive? And what can we do to reduce that for the museum, but also for the people that visit it or want to visit it as well? So we're always about practicality. We often say to the organisation, where's the problem? Can we help you remove the problem? And that's why we talk to a lot of the policymakers and funders and things like that.
And it's what led us on to deciding to have this first EMBED Talks podcast focused on social media. So we know in heritage, social media is used already. I've had the pleasure of joining Museum Hour in the last couple of weeks. That's been fantastic, seeing the conversations, but helping those organisations better leverage social media, because not all of them will be as familiar as some, was the reason behind setting up this first podcast. So let's scoot on into that conversation. So what I want to start off with is a question, Becky, around why is social media right now such a hot topic?
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a prolific tweeter. I like Twitter, I do. I love to connect with other people, and also in regards to who is doing what out there. And at the moment, I mean, that is just one of a few of the platforms that are available for offer at the moment. I mean, gracious me, I don't know about you, but I'm actually going through a list of all the diversity in respect to social media at the moment. We've got Instagram, we've got LinkedIn, we've got Facebook, WhatsApp, and it just allows us to talk so much to other people and engage with other people, particularly with what we're up to, with friends and family, with colleagues and peers. It's such a wide tool. But I suppose it's kind of one of those things where do businesses connect with regards to social media?
And you're absolutely right. I mean, I use Twitter probably more than anything else in the current times we find ourselves, these challenging times, there's a family WhatsApp group that was set up, which offers no end of entertainment. When I see the messages coming through from the mums and the aunties. But having those tools for friends and family as well as customers is really important. And certainly in my experience, across the course of my career in the sectors I engage with, most businesses and organisations in the UK, around the world, will use social media, be that to connect and create those communities and have those conversations, but also to make available information about them as an organisation and their commitment, or the products that they're going to sell and offer to people. So I think when you consider social media, it's a great tool to connect, and it's a great shop window.
I think that's such a key couple of words there. It's your shop window. Absolutely.
And we've seen more of it in recent weeks. So where we find ourselves in terms of the current crisis, we know that there are organisations out there. Heritage is one that's, got many challenges because of the current crisis.
Definitely.
Over those recent weeks, organisations of all shapes and sizes, whether it's in the heritage sector, whether it's been my local butcher, businesses of all shapes and sizes are really looking to adapt to new ways of working. And I think social media, being that hot topic, has been one of those tools that's helping them to adapt.
It's also that continuous connection with customers, isn't it? Or in our case, visitors.
Yeah.
To say we're still here. Yeah.
And I think that it's a great point, that continuous connection. Many of our people are now remote working. So when you think of social media, the benefits that it has suddenly come under the spotlight as that alternative, supplementary way to keep our organisations and our services going. Not only just the conversation, but actually to keep the lights on in the business that we're running. So that kind of leads us on to the second question I have for you. And that is, people are going to be sat questioning whether it's going to be right for them. So what would your response be to, is social media right for your organisation or my organisation?
I think with anything like this, it's worth considering that you've got a tool here that's got a massive outreach of, could be hundreds of thousands to millions, that's free or relatively low cost to reach out to your customers. And I think that's such a key element to all of this. But most importantly, you can challenge people in what they think, and also in terms of drawing attention to your organisation. So I'm thinking of people who are non-users, as we would say in museums. So maybe diverse consumer groups or diverse visitors in respect to LGBTQ, disabled, neurodivergent visitors. And that in terms, if you reach out to people who may not consider your organisation for them, as right for them, you're actually challenging that preconception, you're challenging that view, and you're able to really sort of identify and potentially collaborate with people who are at home right now, and being able to really sort of reach out to them and say, this could be for you.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen, maybe more so over the last week or so, heritage sector really focusing in on what they can do using social media and other communication type platforms, the Skypes and the Zooms and the really great tools that are out there, and hooking into those diverse consumer groups and hearing what they're saying, allow to play that back into then leveraging social media when you are, marketing those key services, but also delivering your services in creative ways. So the virtual tours that I've seen out there, the projects to offer live chat and image sharing, and these really wonderful creative ways of sharing what the museums still have to offer, leveraging social media. I've seen a lot more of that, and it's definitely one of the things we encourage as part of understanding why this is right for your business. It's right for your business, because you can, or your organization, because you can still continue to offer that shop window and people to see into the wonderful world of heritage.
That's the absolute key. And as it's our shop window, it's so critical in respect to communication to visitors, identification and communication with non-users, but also to your colleagues as well, of who's doing what, and can you team up somehow via a Zoom call, and are you able to really reflect on what you're doing, and look, what are they doing in Cornwall? That sounds amazing, you know. So it's such a wonderful opportunity to just reach out across to colleagues as well.
Yeah, for sure. And if people are going to start looking more at leveraging social media, I think the strategy that underpins it becomes really important. So from your perspective and your experience, when we think about social media strategy, what would be those key elements?
I think with everything, it's got to reflect and support your wider strategic plan in respect to your key messages as an organisation, and also in terms of what those key goals are to those key messages as well, in regards to, do you want to increase your visitor figures? Do you want to increase your awareness of your organisation via your website or to your website? Do you want to increase visitor inquiries in regards to objects? There was a wonderful one recently about the creepiest object that people have in the collections.
I saw
they were, some of them were the nightmares, but it was brilliant, because the key thing was, as a strategy, it actually was really good fun, and it made the national media. So the idea, as part of your strategy, what would be those key goals in respect to that strategy? Would you like to be in the Guardian? And what would you want to do in respect to that social media strategy and those key messages to get you there?
I mean, I did see the example that you gave about those weird and wonderful
oh my God.
the other one that I've joined, the other group that I've joined is on Facebook, actually. I think you might have told me about it. It's literally called The Crap I Found in a Charity Shop. It's got the most wonderful, weirdest findings.
I tell you what, sorry to interrupt, there is one that I think I need to introduce you to, and that is when people act out artwork. So it's hilarious, particularly the one of the guy who's made up this chariot with this kind of toy poodle as a horse. And he is Ben-Hur, apparently. He's in a chariot race depicted by this painting. It is brilliant. And it just shows museums are fun, they're exciting places. It challenges them. Wonderful.
You know yourself, I'm a huge history buff, history geek, unapologetically. And one of the periods that I get really excited about learning about is anything remotely to do with the Tudors, like anything remotely. So for me, that if I was to dress up, it's going to be from one of the great courts, I think. Not sure if I could pull off the dress, but you never know. You never know.
There's a challenge there.
You make a really great point about the examples of how groups are reaching out to people. And, you know, at EMBED, and I know DCN have the same value of believing that the only way we can really create change that is sustainable and that is relevant is to ask the people. So when we're also thinking about that social media strategy, it's important to understand our audience, right? So whether that's our own people, whether that's the people we serve, whether that's our suppliers and agencies that support us, understanding directly from them their preferred content, their preferred communication channels, and how they like to receive those messages. It's okay to go and ask those questions, because when we get the answers back, we know we're going to be responding to something that's been identified as the need.
I think that's so key, because particularly when you're in a busy organisation, you need to have that as a priority. And that process identifies those priorities as well. And that's something that both DCN and EMBED can support organisations with, in terms of particularly inclusive messaging
Yeah.
as well, because we're going to talk about the right social media tools later on, but for me, that social media strategy has to be inclusive. It is better to wait and create a really good piece of inclusive content that will reach out to hundreds and thousands of people than to create one quick fix and look at it about 2 months from now, and you think, oh, why didn't we caption that? Why didn't we do this? Because once somebody has seen that and they can't engage with it, are they likely to return back to you and actually re-engage with you? It's likely they'll go off somewhere else. And for me, that social media strategy, inclusion at the core. There's so much out there to help, and how-tos, which we've got on the web, DCN's website. We're doing this podcast. We can help you with this. That is the absolute key, in that it has to be inclusion at the core.
Yeah, so true. And I think sometimes people think if you focus on the accessible, inclusion naturally comes. I think inclusion is often far broader than just the accessibility conversation. So it's a really great point that you mentioned inclusion at the core and not just accessibility. You know, we absolutely have to ensure things are captioned, that there are braille alternatives where appropriate, that we are considering all conditions and impairments and injuries as we're offering our services and the products that we're going to sell out there for heritage and the experience of heritage. That inclusion piece goes broader than disability and accessibility as well. So it's a really important conversation to have as part of the strategy. It leads us nicely in, actually. You mentioned the different platforms that are out there. Do you want to tell us which one? So I know you prefer Twitter, but if we just take a skip through the different types of platforms that are there, and which one you would use for what reason?
Yeah, because I must admit, if you're starting from this, from a fresh perspective, but also even if you've got an already established Twitter feed, what else is out there in respect to the different changing platforms that social media offers? So you've got things like, of course, Twitter, which is used by news agencies, by international groups, organizations. Lots of people share their news on there. You've also got, it's an all-rounder really in terms of customer updates, to share photos. You've got your video clips and information. You can hold community chats on it via the hashtags, and also in regards to things like polls, quizzes. If you're launching a survey, put it on Twitter, things like that, to keep people up to date with what you're up to, and those key messages as well. And then you've got Facebook. Now, Facebook's quite interesting because Facebook tends to be a slower, kind of more community style, maybe to an slightly older audience. It's used a lot by friends and family to be connected. Things like sharing photos, films, information. You can have private discussions. DCN talks a great deal to the Changing Places Consortium, which is a group of families that have set up a closed group to talk about changing places toilets. And my goodness, that's been fantastic. We've actually collaborated with them on a number of projects through engagement of social media, and we've connected with met in person. It's a wonderful group. And there's some really nice ones as well. So there's one at the moment about historic cookbooks.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So it's a very nice, friendly, closed group, which you ask for an invite. And what happens is that they discuss recipes and how people treated diabetes in 1928. And that's been absolutely fascinating. And from a museum perspective, It's been both a learning experience, but also a great collaborative experience as well. You got LinkedIn, which is more your business networking tool, haven't you?
Yeah. I like LinkedIn.
Yeah, I do.
I do like it. I'm a member of. There's lots of special interest groups.
Yeah.
So I'm a member of a lot of equality, diversity, and inclusion groups. I'm a coach as well, so I'm a member of a lot of coaching groups. But I do find some really great tips and techniques.
I tell you what, as well, an organisation I'm a trustee for called Achievability have got their own LinkedIn group for which they put a lot of their published research on there, but also in terms of connecting with people, particularly the HR professionals.
Yeah, great organisation, Achievability as well. There's some fantastic messages and resources.
Oh God,
there. Yeah,
and very much about connection to groups that may be having difficulties with HR or HR professionals needing advice.
Yeah,
you got things like Instagram, which is very visual in respect to that. It may not be, I think the bottom line with this, you've also got YouTube and creating your own YouTube channels. But for me, it's about, you don't have to do all of them. What's the best thing to do is to actually say, if I've got a piece of information, what platform do I need to post that? And stick with some, build up the content, build up what you need, and then start thinking about the others, because some may not be suitable for your organisation.
No, it's a really great point. And so similar to this, to your strategy, don't try to do too much. The same with the social media platforms is don't take on too much. Go with just one or two. And go with the ones that are really going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. With social media platforms, you get out what you put in, for sure.
Definitely.
But I think looking at heritage, Twitter's a really great one to leverage. But definitely go with just one or two initially. And then, as you say, take it from there. I'm a big fan of YouTube. I think it offers podcasts and videos, and those great messages are brought to life by somebody that you can watch or hear. So I'm a fan of YouTube. I think there are also lots of free accounts that offer what we call social management tools. So one of the big things that I learned many years ago is getting on top of how you manage the messages that you send out. So there's some really great management tools out there. I think we're going to mention it a little bit later, that can help you time your tweets and increase your capacity, just so that you're getting the most out of those social media platforms and you're not getting sucked in. When I first started using Twitter, I was obsessed.
I don't know what you could be referring to.
I was obsessed with Twitter.
Do. Yeah, me too. It's easy to see an hour disappear. Very easy on just tweeting alone. Oh my goodness.
So be mindful of that. We're going to come on to those management suites, but please, people, do be mindful of that. Remember to have real life conversations with other people in your and it kind of leads us on to, so we think of all the platforms that we've got, we are sharing which one you would use for which reason. It's also worth thinking about what type of content will I need to share.
I think with type of content, you've really got to think about what information you really want to deliver. So you may have, within your strategy, you might have already overarching goals in respect to your key messages, your inclusive communications, what you've got on your website. Has your website been updated, for example, and how that delivers in respect to users to your website, things like that. But I think as well as things like what kind of sector updates are there in respect to your leaders, champions, things like that. What and how would you respond to them as well? I think the thing that got me was when I was at a meeting once and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Who does your tweets, DCN?" And I said, "Me." And they said, "Very good. Really like your content." "Oh, thank you very much." Like, that was my reply. And they said, And I said, who are you? Thank you very much for your kind comments, but who are you? And they said, we're an international bank. And I was like, oh,
I've gone
because,
global.
yeah. Well, the thing that got me was when it comes down to it, what you say is actually going to be picked up by people who may not respond. So it's always worth just having a tone or a style that you can have in respect to that, which I think is always key.
Absolutely.
And
You want to be mindful of the message you want people to walk away from your content with. I do quite a lot of work with other organisations on their behalf as an associate, and one of them people will be familiar with. It's Purple Space, and one of the things that we've always considered, and I do this with EMBED, is what do you want people to think, what do you want them to feel, what do you want them to do. So great content will get people thinking and feeling and doing something.
exactly.
So when we start, I mean, what we are going to do following this podcast, we're also going to make available the resource of the conversation on our website. So we'll give some more suggestions around the types of content that you could share. But moving on to what to consider within that social media plan is important. And I come to this one because you mentioned the brand and the look and the feel. So what would I need to consider? What would everyone out there need to consider as part of their social media plan?
I always think that, first of all, you need to look at your core offer in terms of what you do, whether it be learning, your site, any kind of offer in respect to that, particularly right now in what online content you're delivering. Is your online content available in alternative formats? Can you post it to people if necessary? Things like that. And with regards to that it has to align in respect to your business language as well. So just be wary of what words you use. And if you're worried about that, get in touch. It's absolutely fine to get in touch. Also thinking about how frequent you want to post. And that's where social media scheduling tools like Hootsuite and TweetDeck can be an absolute gem, particularly in regards to timing, so you can get on with other things. You can do alternate text for images via TweetDeck and Hootsuite. That's on DCN's website. You've also got things like, think about your quality, not your quantity. Don't just dish it out there, because a lot of tweets can be reactive. And the only problem is they get swamped in just content. In the end, I always say this now, plan before you tweet. Don't just react. Think about it.
Absolutely. I think the same goes for when you're liking or resharing information that other people have posted. I think the same can be said. I know I've done quite a lot over the years on, your personal brand. As a coach, we do quite a lot of stuff around your personal brand. And one of the things you always have to be mindful of is what's the brand that you want people to walk away with. And if you are constantly tweeting and not considering what you're tweeting, then I think that doesn't play into the idea of your organisation that you want people to walk away with. So I think it's a really important point that you mentioned.
That's the key thing. And I think as well that, does your content, is there a specific thing that you want to do, a particular task? So things like a survey or a poll as a key deliverable by the team. So as part of that plan, how much social media do you need? The quality, the quantity, how much does that sit in regards to that survey? And are there any hashtags that fall under that survey or key traffic times, so you get a higher impact? And also in things like being engaging, there is so much content out there. Sometimes it's about being different, like Creepiest Object or tweets about sheep. Everybody in the heritage sector will know what I'm referring to, but that one image has created so much in respect to museums and heritage, and the power of Twitter for museums and heritage. So making it engaging, but ensuring, I'll keep saying it, when it comes to any photos, any descriptions, any films, that inclusion has to be at the core, and that it has to be in an alternative format.
Yeah.
And just that whole element, that as part of that, what information do you need? What will be useful to the people right now?
I think it's a really great point. I think it's also worth noting that when you do use social media and you put yourself out there and you're sharing your content, none of us want to receive negative responses, negative publicity. None of us. However, in the world of social media, that does happen on occasion. And, we've all had, those of us that are familiar with social media, we've all had trolling at some point. So it does occasionally happen. So, do prepare for that. Try not to take that personally. You don't know what's happening on the other end of that tweet. But also consider a plan of how you would deal with that kind of response, with any conflict that comes through on social media. I think that's really important. So you're not kind of caught on the hoof when that comes through, and you know how to respond to it. I personally always just tend to take the high road. If it's a constructive criticism, I'll respond very gratefully for the feedback. In terms of trolling, me personally, I do tend to take the high road.
I think it's key to be honest, because there will be people who do that just for the sake of it, without any real message in respect to what they're doing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that's a key thing.
Yeah, but don't let it stop you using social media, folks.
No.
Just have it's like anything when we're managing our organisations, it's just having a plan around how you would respond. So moving us on, this kind of ties us into kind of getting everything moving forward. So who would I need on my team, and how would I embed social media into my organisation?
Well, I think for a lot of people, for larger organisations, you've got departments that will do that, or those that have specific skills. I think if you're a voluntary run museum or you're a small organisation, you'll be doing it yourself.
Yeah.
I think one of the key elements to that is think about things such as, think about your planning, your goals, make them realistic in regards to your team. Particularly think about those automated tools like TweetDeck and Hootsuite. When it comes down to it, think about how you would engage with your communities, and also use social media to plan and deliver on these particular elements of outreach. I think though as well, particularly if you're a voluntary run group, always look at the skills within your teams as well, into ensuring that if you need some help, who have you got that could help you in terms of smaller organisations. And also in regards to ensure that your board or your leadership or your directors are engaged in what you're doing, and to really sort of find out what they think as well in regards to social media, because it's been interesting on my journey how many people do engage with it, but also how many people don't. And what that means in terms of, if you're trying to introduce something, find out their level of knowledge first, because some directors don't engage with it.
Yeah, it's true. And having that senior, if you are an organisation that's got more senior representation, having them supporting it is going to be really essential to embedding effective, successful social media. I think also getting them to help you to drive it forward, to get involved on social media with their presence is also really important. For the smaller organisations, you and I would come into those smaller organisations. I always suggest there's at least 2 people that can get involved in Twitter. It just helps you with a business continuity approach. I would suggest The other thing, just to go back to your point around training, having some kind of guide around social media and your tone and your messaging style, and the fact that you're going to schedule through Hootsuite or TweetDeck or whatever the case may be, having that kind of social media guide for your organisation is just going to ensure that there's some consistency in the approach and the way in which your messages are being shared out there in the ether of social media.
I think that's key. And also look at your images and how your language and how your outreach is inclusive, particularly in terms of representation, because that's such a key element to any organisation in respect to reaching out its language, and also in terms of its marketing and engaging with its existing users, is that you've got that recognition and that reflection of society. So ensuring that your images represent people, don't use stock photos if you can help it. Also in terms of making sure that they represent difference as well. And also in regards to, like we were saying earlier, think about what happens if somebody does approach something negatively, ensuring that you've got that team ready in what they would do. There's some very good, we can help with this as well in respect to well-being and social media as well, because sometimes it's very difficult to know what to do.
So absolutely,
it's important to also engage the other side of social media and also the role of the organisation in terms of well-being in respect to social media and its input. And
it's a really important point. It leads me on to my next question, which is, how do you know you're reaching people on social media? I hear this question quite a lot when I'm talking to people about building social media strategies. For you, in your experience, how do you know that you're reaching people?
Often it's awareness, particularly in terms of, now you have to be careful, because if you measure likes, follows, shares, retweets, do that using an analytic tool if you can. Don't measure through your own eyes. I only got 2 likes. How come they got 27 and I got 2? Like that, because you tie yourself up in knots about it, and it's not good for you. Often there could be other factors at play in respect to that. And that can be anything from a breaking news story to a government announcement to anything and everything. So use a business analyst tool. I use things like Bitly, things like that.
It's a great tool.
Yeah, it's so useful for things like that. Also look at things like, your community engagement. So what action do people take after reading a post? Shares, retweets and comments. I had a lovely one this morning. We've been really pushing it out in regards to inclusive social media messaging and how-tos. We've focused specifically on the how-tos. And somebody tweeted this morning to DCN to say, I didn't know how to do that. This is great. Thank you. I've done it. I've added alt text to my image. I'm going to do this. And you're like, brilliant, like that.
Fantastic.
This is it. And also, are there any sort of, think about how your website is connected to your social media. Because if you add an update on your website, measure the referrals from social media to your website. And that's a key thing. Where are you getting the most clicks from? Where is that originating? Is it from social media? That can be incredibly useful for indicating website traffic and your marketing and your strategic tools in regards to your organisation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as well, it's about reviewing this on a monthly basis. Don't become reactive, become proactive. We're going to review this next month. Let's have a look at what we've learned.
Yeah, and I think that's, I'm a huge fan of that continual improvement cycle in anything that we're doing, actually. So where something isn't quite having the impact you want, that's fine. It's learn the lesson and tweak what you're doing and then monitor moving forward. I think you do have to get into that discipline of your continual review cycle on a monthly basis, checking how you're doing, are the messages landing, is the content what people want to read about and hear about, and then just constantly going back to your social media plan and the content that you're messaging out, I think is really important.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when we start thinking more about inclusion, what does being inclusive on social media mean to your customer or visitors?
I think with anything, particularly within the heritage sector, it shows a strong commitment to diversity and inclusion. And from the get-go, it needs to be, we were saying earlier about the shop window, it reflects the shop window, and that there is a recognition of diversity and inclusion within the organisation. That recognition is action, that action becomes activity in respect to service provision and workforce. And also that it creates a reputation as well for not only your organisation, but for the sector itself in respect to access, inclusion, equality and diversity. And also in terms of reaching out to particularly everybody in respect to alternative formats, if their needs have changed. Lots of people are homeschooling at the moment, so the value of captions is actually really diverse in itself. So if you've got wooden floors or you've got a noisy background, you engage with captions because it's easier to remain engaged and not distracted by background noise like that, because of things like homeschooling. Absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I feel that if you use social media to share some of the human stories behind your organisation, people will recognise themselves and will be more inclined to sort of want to be react with you, but interact with you, but also in regards to potential volunteers, also in terms of support, helping you as well in respect to your message, and maybe even do fundraising for you. The possibilities are endless by being inclusive.
I'm a huge fan of storytelling. Always have been. I think in your toolkit bag, in any sector, in any kind of organisation, and this is going to be the case for heritage, storytelling is such a powerful tool. We really can't, we talk about people being our greatest asset. They really are, because when you do share those human stories, when you do allow that direct connection, people do recognise themselves. It becomes more representative. The underpinning of inclusion becomes more real and sustainable when you have that human storytelling element within there. So it's a really great point.
This is it. And I think the key thing I often talk about lens. So what lens are you looking at your message like that?
Yeah.
So if you have, how would it be that in terms of your content, you need to ask yourself, does this include people with disabilities, people of all ages, races, sexual orientation, people with neurodiversity? How will this actually resonate with them? But also, how do you include people within your social media content? And if you can't add something, find out how you can. And this is why we're here as well, in respect to that, in those how-tos. Don't leave people out.
And I think it's key. The reason we both do what we do is because we want to help people. We want to help organisations help their people and their visitors, and that collaboration piece is so important, and social media becomes an important part of that as well. What we're going to do to close is share the top tips. So almost a summary of what we've been chatting about across the last 9 questions. So in those top 10 tips, social media is part of a toolkit. It's an important toolkit that will help your organisation to deliver its business plan, its strategic plan. It will have a greater impact if your board or a senior executive or a champion or somebody who is senior leadership type role within your organisation is endorsing. If your resources are limited, be realistic, and going back to Becky's point from earlier, focus on the quality of your content and not the quantity of your content, because you have to remember what do you want people to think, what do you want them to feel, what do you want them to do, and that's going to come from quality content. Always remember the social aspect of social media, and begin by engaging and building communities. There are some brilliant forums out there that we've mentioned. Become members, engage with them, great opportunities to learn, but also really great places for you to share your own thinking and messaging. Watch and learn from those other organisations, other sectors, other communities. Some of the things that Becky and I have changed over the years have been as a result of engaging with wonderful forums out there like Access Chat, Museum Hour. You know, there's some really great conversations. Put people at the heart of your strategy and ensure that no one feels excluded. This is about inclusion. And when we talk about inclusion, we talk about intersectional inclusion. And that means every protected characteristic. So please do think of all difference at the heart of your strategy. And then the last one would be just continually measure and review what works well. Get into that really great habit of taking a look at what you're doing. Can I continue to tweak it and make those changes and get into that continual review cycle? So lots of great goodness that we've heard today from Becky. And thank you so much for joining me on our first EMBED Talks podcast. It's been a delight.
It's been absolutely great. I've really enjoyed myself. It's been brilliant.
Thank you so much for sharing all the lessons that you've learned. To all of our listeners, I hope you find this podcast useful. We are going to do some more over the coming weeks, and we've got some more guests that are going to join us. Becky's going to pop up in another one in the future. So thank you so much for joining us. Please stay safe, and if there's anything that we can do to help, reach out on the website or email. And I'm going to leave you with, we wish you well. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.